What's up, y'all? How's she going? Back with another Worker Wednesday. Um, just out here. Thought I'd do a little quick update. Well, hopefully a bit quick. We'll see what happens. Um, but yeah, just a couple, kind of more worker-focused stories that I picked up over the past week. If you missed the last one, you can go check that out. I think it's probably a lot of it's still relevant. Some of the stories today will also be little. I mean, the end of December basically. So not the most breaking of news, but from some of these countries, sometimes it's hard to find good worker news, union news, things like that. So, just bringing you what I can. It is yeah. There's also just a lot of stuff going on with the world, and obviously, it's hard to find good sources for some of this stuff because obviously the lamestream media doesn't want to talk about worker rights and putting workers first because that's not in their class interest. So that's what you end up with is not too many stories about it, but I did manage to find a decent amount, and so hopefully we can go through these. I will, as I always try to do, tell everybody that if you are listening to this on podcast services, of course that is absolutely fine. Give us a thumbs up, rate us 5 stars on whatever podcast app you are listening on. However, I do recommend that you go to the website or to YouTube or whatever video streaming platform that we are on that you prefer, and listen/watch there, because you'll be able to see all of the sources as we kind of read through them. Now, granted, I usually go through them pretty quick. We don't read through the whole articles because that would take way too long. But I do give you guys some visual cues, and sometimes we watch some videos, and so I think it's more interesting. But you shouldn't be missing too much if you're just listening to the audio-only version, so do what makes you happy. If you do have some articles that you'd like me to talk about or specific issues, let me know. Send them to me. You can send them to me in the Twitch chat. Streaming live on Twitch. Obviously, that's the best way to watch it because you can hit me up on the Twitch itself. But if you can't do that, drop them in the YouTube comments or DM us on any of the FreeChinaPost social media stuffs. So, yeah. And I'll definitely give you guys a shout out. Appreciate any interaction that we can have in general, but also, if you've got some good, interesting stories, always love to signal boost that kind of stuff. Without further ado, let's get into this bad boy. So, we've been talking about this. I talked about it on last Worker Wednesday. We also talked about it on the formal podcast, the last one we did, which everyone should go check out. That is over here. This one. FreeChinaPost. Let's return to traditions, folks. Okay, so go listen to that. You should be subscribed on podcast services anyway, so you should have listened to that one by now. Yeah, it's getting worse. The U.S. set a global COVID record, over 1 million cases recorded in one day. Okay, so this was on Monday. It's currently Wednesday night here in Taiwan, so Wednesday morning. If you're in the States, it's getting wild. It's getting wild, and I've been hearing both sides of this. Whether it's complete freak out over we're gonna all die, which I don't think we'll all die, but a lot of people might. And the other side is that it's fine. It doesn't really matter. So you can see here, this is kind of the obfuscation of it. Maybe that's not the correct word, but the trying to reassure people. So here it says, while surging cases haven't yet translated into severe infections and skyrocketing deaths, their impacts have been felt across the country as the newly infected isolate at home. The results are canceled flights, closed schools and offices, overwhelmed hospitals, and strangled supply chains. So actually, that's not as bad as I thought. But this is true. And the other thing is that people are talking about, like, it's more mild form. It's more mild form. Like, we've had this variant for, like, a week or so now. Like, how do you know it's more mild? Like, it seems more mild at first from anecdotal data that we have. Like, the big study that everyone was talking about had 12 people in it. So we don't really know what's going to happen. And granted, like, more people are vaccinated, so there's, like, the vaccines, at least against the previous variants, that it didn't really stop the spread, especially against Delta, but it definitely did seem to keep people out of hospitals and prevented people from dying as much. So that's good, and hopefully it does so with this Omicron as well, but we don't really know yet. Maybe this strain has certain effects where it's much more likely to give people long COVID, and it ignores the vaccine in that case. We just don't know. That's the thing right now, is that it's so new, and people are just so used to it that they're just like, whatever. It's party. Like, people are like this. I love when people are just like, oh, this COVID, it's taking away my life. Like, I can't wait to go back to normal. And then it's like the next, like, their IG is just like full of pictures of them going to, like, the club and stuff. It's just like, it's not ruining your life. Like, what are you talking about? You're just like, you just show it off for social media. So, yeah, people need to be staying home. That's the thing. The government should be paying people to stay home. And I mean, like we talked about, the reason for this partially is because the CDC has taken, at least in the U.S., has taken no responsibility. They're just like Fauci. We talked about it on, like I said, both the last two podcasts, the last Worker Wednesday, and then also the last one I did with Ari. They're just like, yeah, no, it's chill. Like, let's cut the COVID quarantine time in half. And if you're asymptomatic, then just go to work. And it's like, if you're asymptomatic, they used to say this all the time. If you're asymptomatic, you can still pass on the disease. So that's out the window now. It's very scientific. And Fauci literally said it's because we're worried about the slowing down of the American system. So he's admitting that it's not about health or science anymore. It's about capitalism, baby. It's about keeping that machine running and making sure we have plenty of human pulp to run through it. So that's where it's going. I think people need to take a little page out of potentially the recent Chinese workers playbook, and Tangping just lie flat. Just said, no, we're not going to do that. Like, we're going to stay at home. And if you have a big problem with it, like, you can pound sand. Like, we outnumber you. What are you going to, like, what are you realistically, like, what is the establishment going to do? Is the CDC going to go to people's houses and be like, you need to go to work, sir, or madam? No, they're going to say, okay, well, shit, what am I going to do? And they're not going to do anything. So people need to get together. This is why things like unions are super important, is because people need to organize, band together, and go, no, we're not going to take this anymore. And if you don't like it, like, then you can sit down at the table with us and bargain with us. But if you're going to just try to force us at basically, gunpoint to go back into work and potentially die and kill our immunocompromised relatives, no deal, sir. Sorry. So this is an example of this. The National Nurses Union is urging school districts not to offer remote learning. So basically, to not go to school, not necessarily not go to school at all, but to not necessarily force people to go to school. Okay. So it says, with the COVID-19 infection numbers fueled by the highly transmissible Omicron variant reaching all-time records in the United States and pediatric hospitalizations rates skyrocketing. So this is another thing that people love to talk about. Oh, children don't get it. Children are fine. Children aren't affected. Pediatric hospitalization rates are skyrocketing. I mean, I should find the exact numbers for this, but They are going up. I mean, obviously, people are getting infected, and people are going to worry about their kids when they get infected. So everyone's saying, "Oh, send your kids to school." Kids, if kids wear masks, like, how can they understand how facial features work? And it's like, well, if you're worried about how kids recognizing facial features, you could do distance learning, and kids could look at the teacher's face because they don't need to wear a mask if they're doing distance learning, and if they aren't doing distance learning and they're in the class, they might be able to look at some people's faces, but also people are allowed to wear masks at school. Like, I know some of my teacher friends at home, they have kids that don't mask, but like most of the other students, and then also the teachers will mask because they're very deeply afraid of potentially dying, or infecting other people. So it's ridiculous. But yeah, they're calling on all school districts and policymakers to offer remote learning as an option for families, which would also allow more social distancing within classrooms. So we'll see how exactly this happens. I mean, obviously, in places like Florida, they're not going to do it. DeSantis is like really stoked on just like everyone's coughing and spitting and shitting in each other's mouths. I always try to get through these ones without swearing, but this one was very fast. But I'm a little frustrated. But so they're saying they're advising people to physically distance in order to avoid infection. School children are generally required to gather in large groups daily. Okay. Now, I would like to say that there is a caveat, obviously, with things like because the United States has horrible infrastructure and is honestly loves to keep people in poverty. There are issues, I should say, with things like broadband internet access for certain places. I used to live in one of those places, which is the countryside, but also in inner city areas. There is often great struggles with getting broadband access. And also you have these internet monopolies in certain areas that create these, create a little fiefdom. And they say, listen, if you want internet access that's over 1 megasecond with 20 meg data caps per month, then you need to pay us like a 30-year salary. And it's ridiculous. And what the U.S. should do, obviously, is do something like an actual Build Back Better plan where they actually get broadband access to everyone, including people in the country, in the inner city, wherever it is. Make sure that everyone has access to affordable, quick internet. So hopefully people push for that. So that is one thing that has to be considered. Again, this is why they should offer it, and then if a certain number of children need to go in, then they can spread them out. They could put classes in the biggest classrooms that they have, spread them out, make sure that the ventilation is as good as possible, et cetera, but try to minimize this as much as possible, if it is really necessary. Though, to be fair, most schools are on break right now anyway, so hopefully everyone is staying safe at home. So this is another reason, again, why unions are important. It says here, Chicago's public school classes are canceled after teachers' unions back remote learning. So again, schools, not only nurses are backing this, but also school teachers are backing remote learning. So this is also good. It's basically the same idea, is that they're calling for, so this is, it says the status of instruction for the rest of the week remained in limbo. The union's action, so this is Chicago's teachers union, approved by 73% of members, called for remote instruction until cases substantially subside or union leaders approve an agreement for safety protocols with the district. So this is another issue, is that there's like basically no standard of safety protocols, and so kind of parents are getting to dictate it, just like with the critical race theory and all these whispering liberals. There's just parents are basically allowed to decide public health. So now parents are medical experts and experts on history, which is laughable because the average American has a very, let's say, loose grasp on either, I would say. Now, there are caveats to that, but few and far between, I would say. But again, this is why having a union is important, because these people can walk out together and say, eat shit, basically. So here's basically another thing is record U.S. quits. Hiring slowdowns may show Omicron's. Why is this on my screen? Oh, no. That was an X. That should have closed that. Anyway, that's a better advertisement. Record U.S. quits. Hiring slowdowns may show Omicron's impact on labor supply. Obviously, it is, but it's not just Omicron. It's all the variants. It's COVID in general. Having numbers of people quit. People are just getting fed up. The minimum wage has not raised in over a decade. I showed you the on the last Worker Wednesday, the maiden voyage episode. I showed you all the stats. Basically, wages haven't risen in decades. If you adjusted for inflation or productivity, workers would be making $24-$25 an hour. It's absurd. So, of course, people are not going to work for the same amount of pay that they were working for before in a pandemic. It doesn't make sense. And that's why, again, people need unions so they can work together to say, no, we're not going to do this. And if you want to have a functioning supply chain and you want to have a functioning business, then you're going to have to compensate us instead of giving your CEO a raise of like a quarter or $10 million every year, which depending on the business. It's absurd. So again, talking about nurses, there's a Medscape study that's showing that a large percent of nurses are burning out in the pandemic. Obviously, go Google interview with COVID nurses. You can quickly find out how brutal. They're just literally, I have numerous family members that are nurses. They're just watching people die right now. That's all they're doing. They're going in and people are coming in and that are unvaccinated, or people even that are vaccinated. And obviously the vast majority of them are unvaccinated. And they're begging for their lives, and they're asking for a vaccine on their deathbeds. And it's sad. It's horrible. I don't want to see anyone lose their life regardless of their vaccine status. It sucks. And they're just dying. And so basically these people are just running around dealing with numerous more patients than they normally would deal with. And they're just watching people die every day. So it's pretty horrible. So of course there's going to be a lot of people quitting. It's not surprising in the least. Now in Worcester, Massachusetts, it's good to see that they basically have been on a long strike. Unfortunately, as this article talks about, they didn't really get that positive of concessions, and union strikes don't always get them. But I guarantee that they got more than they would have if they had done nothing. Now, this has some parallels with the strike I talked about with Seth. So you can go check out the podcast I did with him about the striking carpenters in Washington that was happening earlier last year now, and give that a listen. But basically, union leadership seems to have kind of acquiesced to big business, whereas the nurses themselves were not exactly happy with the deal. So again, it says that the union officials paid lip service to the determination of the rank-and-file nurses who rejected multiple sellout proposals over the 10-month period and praised the deal as a significant gain, but they actually only got a 2% wage increase in each of the 5 years of the agreement, and 5-year agreements are also not usually good in terms of unions, because that means you can't renegotiate for 5 years, which kind of sucks. And also 2% wage increases, as this article aptly states, far below the current inflation rate of 6.8%. So they're taking a effective pay cut. Okay, that's another thing to remember. If you're not getting a raise every year, you're getting a pay cut. So these are things that people need to remember. Okay, like I talked about earlier, this article talks about staffing ratios. So basically, you're getting 4 and 5 to 1 patient to nurse ratios. It's insane. But of course, these people, just like teachers, when they go on strike, everyone says, "Oh, well, I guess you don't care about your patients. I guess you don't care about your students." And it's like, no, actually, these people are fighting so that their patients have more chance to survive, and also they're entitled to strike to get paid more. That's their right as human beings. They should be treated with dignity, and if they don't want to go jump on the grenade that everyone in society pulled the pin on by not taking responsibility, especially the government, though, obviously, not locking down the borders, not wearing your masks, etc., etc. Honestly, if you want to complain, please be my guest and go work at a hospital. I'm guessing most people wouldn't last 30 minutes, but just my guess. And again, like I said, people talk about sending these kids back to school, and how it doesn't really affect them, even though there are cases of kids dying, and they are pretty rare for the most part. But this isn't rare, is that kids get sick at school and then they go back home and kill their parents or their grandparents. So this article is talking about how, and this, keep in mind, this article is from like 7 months ago. So this number is quite low. But it says 1.5 million kids may have lost parent or caregiver due to COVID-19. 1.5 million children in the United States. Okay, this I shouldn't say in the United States. This is technically around the whole world, but I would say the United States might be getting close to this number, because if you look at COVID deaths, the United States, I think the United States makes up about 5% of the world population. Let's check these numbers. U.S. as percent of world population. Yep, less than 5%. So there you go. I was close. 4.25. Okay. U.S. COVID deaths as percentage of world deaths. If I can type. So let's see. Maybe that's not how I should have done it. So let's do this. U.S. COVID deaths are about 820,000, I think. And then we'll do world COVID deaths. I just want to know the total numbers. Global cases, global deaths. So 5 million. Use my 5,400,000. Okay. And then we have U.S. COVID deaths. It doesn't even say. Where's the number? Look at this. It doesn't even say. Yeah. 800 and they don't want to tell me. 824,000. So, yeah, like a little under a fifth. So maybe we could say 17% or so. So, that's not great. So we can't say that the whole one of the 1.5 million are in the U.S., but I would say probably a decent amount of them are. Okay. But yeah, I'll post this, and then, like I also said, this is also 7 months ago, so it's only getting worse, and also will continue to. So yeah, so we need to remember that this is going to affect people greatly, and will continue to affect people. Wow, this is amazing. I hit my keyboard with my forearm. Okay, so this is also just kind of more information. I won't go through all this, so we can get through all this in a reasonable time. But this is nurses looking for relief amongst burnout and COVID surge. Obviously, it's getting worse. This is some positive news that we do have, though. But Amazon agrees to make it easier for workers to unionize on-site in settlement with Labor Board. Now, this, we'll see if this is accurate and if this actually is true. But Amazon reached a settlement with a National Labor Relations Board. Okay, basically to make it easier for workers to organize in their organized unions in their warehouses. Whether they actually do this, because they've lied about this before, whether they do this or not, we'll see. But it is showing that at least in rhetoric, they're bending to pressure that this union move and also the mass resignations. But I would say mostly that these organizing techniques and people's also focus on this. Like you look at what happened in Bessemer with the union there, and they're potentially going to get a second bite at the apple in Bessemer, Alabama, thankfully, because of corrupt union busting practices that Amazon did, illegal union busting practices, which, by the way, should carry huge, huge fines. I mean, like, they should deeply feel that. All of those workers that got screwed over with that should be getting, I would say, tens of thousands of dollars. And then they should also get their union. Maybe more. But, yeah, they should be getting fined by the United States government to the tune of millions of dollars for union busting practices. That should not at all be acceptable. But yeah, I think financial crimes by elites and by giant corporations should be punished to the degree that they either can't pay them and thus their company crumbles, or they know that if we do this again, we will be dead. And I think that also if they're repeat offenders, those fines should keep climbing up. But anyway, this is good. It's at least a little bit of progress. So hopefully this continues, and hopefully more and more people get inspired to, as this union or the union effort in Bessemer, I should say, did spark some hopes for unions and other Amazon warehouses, where, I mean, you can read numerous stories. Just type in Amazon warehouse deaths, and there was that story from Illinois with the tornado that happened, where they basically wouldn't let people leave, and then a number of people died. But also, they don't, for the longest time, they didn't air condition until there was a huge public outcry, and then they started air conditioning the plants because people were literally just dropping dead. And after people died, there was internal memos saying that, oh, maybe we should air condition them. And obviously Bezos and the other management ignored them until there was a huge media campaign, and then they actually did something. So that's why people need to pay attention to this stuff going on. Another positive news, Right to Repair is making progress here. Basically, Apple is saying that it will sell parts and tools for fixing iPhones. So this is a huge deal. I've talked about Right to Repair. I've also written about Right to Repair on FCP before. Returns a huge amount of money to consumers, and doesn't let companies create these monopolistic practices where they basically price gouge you to fix very, very simple problems they could easily fix by yourself if you have any sort of technical knowledge at all. And if you don't have any sort of technical knowledge at all, you can give your friend $20 to do it for you. So, as opposed to giving a giant exploitative company like Apple thousands of dollars to do so. So this is just, similar info, but this is, I put this under U.S. News, but this is going to be EU and UK. They're also expanding. So it's expanding these right to repair laws, which this is a big deal. If they start to expand them in not necessarily the UK. UK is kind of, it's an important country in the grand scheme of things, but it is quite a small country. But the EU, with its large population size, that's going to be a much bigger deal. If someone like the United States, these capitalist giants start to do it, that will be, I think, a big snowball effect leading to basically the end of these anti-right to repair mandates. And you guys can go check out my article here, basically about Biden pushing for or pushing through an executive order that was supposed to help with right to repair. So that's one of the few things I'll give him credit for, thankfully. And we'll see, as I state in this article, we'll see if we should actually give him credit. I would not give him credit yet, I would give him maybe tacit credit, like, good job for your rhetoric. Now let's see some action. But it's going to be a few months, I think, until until really any of this takes effect. But a lot of the deadlines, I wrote about this executive order as well, so you can read this. This executive order, and then I don't know where I linked it. Maybe I can't find it. But anyway, I also did a breakdown of the. Oh yes, I did a breakdown of the executive order as well, and you can check that out, and we'll see if they're going to follow through with it, because there's a lot of corrupt dealings. You look here, a lot of members that maybe have some conflicts of interest, but yeah, you can look through this and judge for yourselves. I hope they do the I hope they do the right thing, and do things right, but we'll see. Moving on, let's do a little China news. So you got China saying that it's going to let ride-hailing drivers and delivery workers form unions. So basically, like some of these gig workers to form unions. Now, that's maybe good step, but unions in China are not exactly the same as unions in the United States, so we'll see if they actually it makes much of a difference. As you can see here, it says all unions in China are required to register with the government-backed All China Federation of Trade Unions, of the ACTFU. To date, such unions have largely been confined to sectors such as manufacturing and transport. So it's possible they do have some positive impact. To say that China doesn't have like labor strikes or labor organizing is not correct. They do, and there are people. It's not always linked to unions, but the same thing. Like a lot of people believe that like no protests happen in China, and it's just not right. We just don't hear about it a lot because one, the U.S. media doesn't like to cover like any. Speaking from personal experience, but it seems like honestly like quote unquote Western media in general, but I don't even see it in Taiwanese media very much. A lot of people don't like to cover, let's just say, news media. These giant news conglomerates don't like to cover striking workers and unionization drives because it doesn't necessarily help their case, nor does it protesting, though sometimes it does. But they're also usually on like a small scale in like local places where maybe it would be harder to get out. Also, China is a repressive regime where they're not going to let a lot of stuff get out because they don't want to look like they have dissent against the government. So I think all those factors kind of work together to make sure that there's not a lot of coverage of this kind of stuff. But it does happen. Xi Jinping has obviously been crapping down on any sort of dissent. So I was reading about the Feminist Five today, but maybe we'll save that for another time. But it definitely does happen. So don't let people make you believe that this will have no impact. I hope it does have a great impact, and that because these workers are greatly overworked, especially when you're talking about during a pandemic. But we'll see. I'm not going to go through this stuff because it will take way too long, but I'm going to put these in the description like I do with all of the resources and links that I use. But there's this from SubChina, which is labor unrest and how China balances repression and responsiveness. There's some interesting information in here. There's another website here, chinastrikes.crowdmap.com. This map is, fair enough to say, is pretty out of date, but can give you some ideas about the number of strikes that were going on. Most of the data ends about 2012, 2013, but you can see how many, granted, China is a huge place, but you can look at all these strikes, December 29th, December 29th, December 29th, December 27th, December 27th, December 26th. So you just have protest, strike, protest. Okay, so saying that it doesn't happen. Now, granted, this is a while ago. This is 10 years ago now, but to act like it doesn't happen is farcical. So yeah, I'm gonna try to find some more recent information about some of this stuff, because I would like to look into this more, and give exact examples of some of these strikes. But they certainly they certainly do like to strike in China. Again, Xi Jinping is cracking down, but it still happens. However, in Hong Kong, they are dismantling the unions. So you have basically state media outlets claiming that these unions are involved in money laundering and inciting riots and supporting gangsters, even though that's exactly what the CCP is generally involved in. But they, basically China has been using its puppet government in Hong Kong to shut down some quite storied unions, like the Hong Kong Professional Teachers Union, and its 95,000 members. Other ones like obviously the Hong Kong Journalists Association, which they just closed. We talked about on the last episode of the podcast. Stand News. They've almost completely wiped out any sort of free press in Hong Kong in just over a year. Just completely wiped it out. So yeah, they're pushing a lot. They're also pushing student unions to disband. So yeah, I mean, everyone check out these articles. But yeah, it's horrible. I mean, you can see how quickly it rose and fell. So this is an important part of this article. Real quick, and I encourage everyone to read the whole thing. But Hong Kong's labor movement gained momentum during the 2019 protests. So this would be like the Fan Song Zong, like the anti-extradition and protests, in which 2 in 7 Hong Kongers participated. So, we as FCP personally went out and went to one of these protests. There was like 2 million people in the street, and Hong Kong has like a population of like a little over 7 million. So it was it's a lot of people, and you can imagine that there's other people that are just a little bit scared to go out of their houses, something like that, or they have to work, or they have kids that they need to take care of. So a lot of Hong Kongers not happy about what China's doing in their country, but they need backup. But it says citywide strikes became more broadly accepted. People from various professions, ranging from hairstylists to accountants, formed nearly 4,000 new unions. So this is what happens when you have both social organizing and just people organizing in general, getting close together, talking face to face, and pushing against the oppression that they face, whether that's in terms of freedoms that the government is curbing, or whether it's subjugation in terms of capital and their exploitation of their labor, which we can see definitely happens in Hong Kong. The housing prices are getting horrible everywhere, but look at Hong Kong. I recommend that to you, because a lot of people in Hong Kong live in some pretty dire straits when it comes to housing. They're living in like dormitories basically with 20, 30 other people, because people don't want to pay 50% of their paycheck to live in a shitty apartment by themselves. So it's really important that we all around the world and across both internally and internationally start to grow these sorts of solidarity movements. But yeah, once the national security law passed in Hong Kong, they basically just started arresting anyone that threatened their power at all. I'll also put this in the description, but this is also a little bit dated. But it's union organizing in China, still a monolith labor movement, and there's some. I haven't read every word of this, but it seems like there's some nuance here that's important for understanding this. So if you're really interested in diving deep, you can find a copy of this. I'm not sure if you can download it from here, but I thought I did. If you can't, you can probably find it somewhere. That's what I'll say. All right, so connected to this, both the U.S. and China, and then also what we'll talk about Taiwan is little India news. So, Apple Pro supplier after workers in the Winston plant in India rampage. Some loaded language there. This is a couple weeks ago. It says that in New Delhi, Apple Incorporated said on Monday that it is investigating whether a Taiwan contractor, Winstrom Corp, flouted supplier guidelines at an iPhone manufacturing facility in India after some workers ransacked the plant in a protest over unpaid wages. Thousands of contract workers gathered on the grounds of Winstrom to strike on the outskirts of India's tech hub of Bengaluru. Bengaluru. I hope I'm saying that semi-correctly. On Saturday, demanding unpaid wages and better working hours. As police arrived, the crowd turned violent. Video from the scene showed people armed with rods and sticks smashing equipment and vandalizing cars, causing what the company has $60 million in damages. Now, I would like to say, people will turn around and say, ooh, these violent workers. These workers have had probably more than that stolen from them in wages. And also there's a difference between violence against inanimate objects and violence against humans, which police, often when they show up to these labor demonstrations, inflict, shooting tear gas and blinding people with rubber bullets and bean bags and arresting people and ruining their lives, sometimes killing people. So I don't know if any of this necessarily happened in this case because there's not a lot of details. But this has to do with basically iPhone manufacturing. So this is one thing that I've been happy to see is that I'm not a big... Anyone that listens to the podcast knows Ari and I are not big Apple people. Ari is probably more than I am. But I don't own any Apple products. Never have. Probably never will. But anyway, I also don't begrudge people for buying Apple that much. I'll joke around, give people flack about it, but in the end, it's all consumerism. There's no ethical consumption under capitalism, as they say. I don't know why I did my Alex Jones voice for that. Socialist Alex Jones. If you're consuming under capital, it's never ethical because you are de facto stealing wages from the workers, and that is unacceptable. But this is, again, like I said, kind of connected to what's going on with some of this stuff in Taiwan. So you have Taiwan moving this manufacturing. So what I was going to say is I'm happy to see some of this move from China to India, this production of things like iPhones. These democratic countries moving their production from China to places like India, where there is more democratic processes and also some more the more receptiveness of the government to demands, and it's a little easier to deal with some of these with governments like India. Now, we shouldn't be, I don't think we should be exploiting workers anywhere, so we should be working on this. But obviously there's some issues about food safety in some of these plants. So there's over 17,000 workers, and hundreds had food poisoning. More than 150 were hospitalized, which is insane and unacceptable. Again, these companies, this is Foxconn, I believe, should be paying insane fines for this sort of stuff. They should absolutely be held accountable. If they say, "Well, we weren't aware," well, that's your problem, not my problem. Your problem, not my problem. I do think governments should be doing some oversight over this, but also they should require companies to take care of these things, and if they don't, again, huge fines. And if they continue to violate it, I don't know. I mean, India can't nationalize this company. It's not an Indian company, but they could take over the plant, shut it down. Foxconn is kind of owned by Terry Gould. Not a big fan of that guy, but anywho's'll be. So hopefully I would say read through all of this. I'm not going to read through every word of it. But like it says here, it talks about here at the end that basically this is kind of a new landscape where Terry Guo had formerly been able to go to China and kind of play these localities against each other. And also he seems to be pretty good buds in a lot of ways with the CCP. But when going to India, workers might demand a little bit more and also be able to protest a little bit more freely. We saw that kind of with the farmer strike that was going on and actually won a lot of gains in India. I don't know that fight's totally over yet, but at least for now, it seems like they've kind of won for the time being. So hopefully, as Tim Copeland says here, in Taiwan, firms must acclimate faster. Customers need these new factories to ramp up quickly in order to ease their reliance on China, while both New Delhi and Taipei are in a hurry to forge a strong trading relations that can help blunt Beijing's economic power. So I tend to agree with this, but I also care less about trade and more about workers' rights. So hopefully they find a way to acclimate by adequately compensating their workers and making sure that they have safe working environments. So we have a lot of undocumented immigrants. This is kind of just more, we talked about some of this stuff before, but this is like reasons for undocumented immigrants in Taiwan. Obviously, a lot of it is because there's obviously numerous reasons. But it says, I can read some of this real quick. It says, at present, there are more than 50,000 undocumented migrant workers in Taiwan, and according to statistics provided by the National Immigration Agency of the NIA, there was an increase of 3,987 recorded in 2020, which is higher than 2020. In particular, migrant domestic workers among the most likely to become undocumented due to their low salaries, the long working hours, and mental pressure of working alone. Research explained that these warning signs, including low salaries, coupled with the difficulty task of taking care of elderly people and lack of support providing care, often lead migrant workers to run away and escape their tough predicament. I would also say that working in factories 6 days a week without adequate compensation and go away. Why would you take over like half my screen here? Sorry, I'm mad at these advertisements. The brokerage system where basically they can put them into debt peonage. There's a lot of reasons. And this is something that Taiwan, if it wants to be a true, like, whatever you want to say, like liberal democracy, an international hub and a bastion of freedom and human rights, needs to deal with yesterday. They have a horrible record on this, and the government has been dragging its feet for far too long. But I'll post some of this stuff. Similarly here, COVID insurance required for migrant workers and new regulations. I actually think this is fine, but like Brian says here, is that basically they would require these migrant workers to get COVID insurance, and they're saying that they will require that will be paid for by the employer, but whether that actually happens is yet to be seen. It's very possible that on the sly, these people are going to push it on to the migrant workers or ask for compensation or whatever. So Taiwan needs to get much more serious about all this. I've talked about Taiwan's unwillingness or basically just unwillingness, let's be frank about it, to deal with some of these issues, because these people are I think in the eyes of a lot of Taiwanese people, disposable. I think that's just kind of what it comes down to. Now, I don't think that maybe that's not the majority of Taiwanese, but I think in terms of the elites, for sure it is. These people are uneducated, and we can bring them here and treat them like trash. And if they complain about it, we can pay them as little as possible so we can maximize our apartments, and they complain about it, we'll just send them back home. And it's gross, and that's not how you treat humans if you live in a a country that values human rights. So, yeah. Anyway, need to clean that up pretty quick. All right, folks, I'm gonna get out of here. One thing I want to plug: go read Ari's article. It's pretty quick, and actually, he's got a number of new articles up. Wow, I'm getting a lot of weird ads. Do disable your ad blocker though, and if you see any interesting ads, feel free to click on them. We got the podcast here. Got the Workers Wednesday from last time, and then Ari's got a bunch of new articles up. We got all kinds of stuff, and like we mentioned on the podcast last week, on this podcast, there's going to be some new authors soon, new contributors. So we should have a lot more like local Taiwanese / also some news from China coming out, kind of more short, punchy articles that you guys can hopefully read quickly and kind of get a quick update. So make sure you guys are visiting the site every day, if you can, on your browser, make it your home page, and then just kind of see what's new every day. Also, like I said, clicking on ads if you're interested, it does help us a lot. But yeah, this is also just that. But also, if you do have a couple extra dollars a month to throw our way, it's like less than a cup of coffee, as they always say, as everyone always says, less than a cup of coffee every day. It's probably less than most people's drug habits. Okay, every month, maybe every week, as little as $3 a month, you can support us. You can join our Discord for $3, $5. We'll send you a postcard every month. So do that, y'all. Hit us up. And like I said, if you do have any stories for either the regular podcast or for especially for these Worker Wednesdays, from any country. I don't just, like I did India again today. The first week I just did U.S., Taiwan, and China. But I would love to do worker stories from anywhere. So if you got them from wherever, just hit me with them, and I'll try to include them, because I think workers around the world need to be united. It's not just about whatever country that they currently live in. It's about I need to find a new word, but it's about building solidarity. Like that's what it's about. It's not about arguing about theory on the internet. It's about like building true bonds around the world. So yeah, let's do it, y'all. Anyway, in a true rambling fashion, I love y'all. I'll talk to you soon. And you know that FCP